a scion of many worlds. I was informed you were supposed to be on vacation. Admiral's sister notes and Emmanuel shrugs. I'm not doing anything stressful. I'm just putting a to-do list together to keep my mind occupied while I rest. Emmanuel offers and the Admiral huffs in amusement over the console. You have lax doctors. My own would have outright football tackled me by now. Admiral's sister notes before thinking. Still, your daughter has some good ideas. I'm taking it as a sign that she's recovering physically, by the way. As am I. She was staring down the barrel of at least a dozen different genetic diseases and weaknesses. Even if nothing else is done for her, Mother has added a solid 40 painless years to her lifespan, barring injury or disease, of course. Emmanuel states and Admiral's sister nods. Speaking of, does she have any information about where the other retention bands ended up? The one used to create you was not the only one that went missing. No, sir. It was given to her by a former student to pay off her debts, then she vanished. That much I know. She's already sent that information of her own volition, including the identity and profile of the former student in question. Unfortunately for us, the woman is completely off the grid. Admiral Cistern explains. It's far too easy to create a fake ID in such an overlarge community as the galaxy. You have some extra IDs, don't you? My lawyer has told me to answer that question in the negative, Admiral Cistern states. Sir, understood, sir, Emmanuel states. Still, back on topic. We're in a legally interesting place. The undaunted is classified more akin to a growing religion with a military force instead of an actual nation. Due to the fact we have influence over several worlds, we are afforded a seat on the Galactic Council. I see. So, if we can work in some undaunted effects into this ceremony, it grants us further legitimacy and can set a theme. After all, we do have hopes for that world. We do indeed, Emmanuel states. What kind? Zavia says as she opens the door from the outside. And how long was she listening in? Admiral Cistern asks. About the last 10 minutes, Emmanuel states. You knew? Zavia asks in surprise. Of course, Emmanuel says, running a claw over an antenna. I can see far more than most with these. Oh, what's your plan for Lacrin? A recruiting world. Essentially, we want to start a strong warrior culture on Lacrin based around self-improvement and personal excellence. Encourage everyone to be the best they can be, and then we have wonderful potential soldiers to hire and train. The cloning method may have created a series of weaknesses in the blood from one generation to the next, but... Genetics, Zavia interrupts. Ah, pardon me for assuming you hadn't progressed that far, young lady. Admiral Cistern remarks with his charm turned on. With the gray in his hair and the fond look on his face, you would swear he was Zavia's doting grandfather. Anyways, even with the genetic degradation that has run rampant on Lacrin, or Lacrin 297 as the galactic tally would have it, you and yours have developed a considerably more resilient culture than much of the galaxy at large. The idea of a famine or the loss of family is likely to make many of them go numb. The galaxy beyond your world is so fattened and pampered by unimaginable wealth that the slightest conflict is enough to render them catatonic. It's strange to think of my life as one grand test or trial, Zavia says, and Emmanuel gives her a pat on the shoulder. Well, compared to much of the galaxy, you've had a very hard life. You'd still be in basic schooling at this point elsewhere, and you'd be surrounded by a family as large as a small army. If you had grown up on another world in the galaxy, you'd not only still have your mother, but grandmother, great-grandmother, and likely great-great-grandmother as an everyday fixture in your life. To say nothing of dozens of full-blooded and half-siblings, you'd have never known the idea of sickness. Hunger would be a vocabulary word alone, and death would be a concept that has never become more than a thought experiment in your mind. That I can't even imagine. Could any family support so many? You underestimate the sheer amount of wealth there is in the galaxy. Families of hundreds can easily live like lords. So yes, compared to many, even you have lived a life of strife and deprivation, making you a great deal stronger than many peoples the galaxy over. Zavia intones as she flexes an arm thoughtfully. Not quite what I meant, but yes, in there as well, Admiral Cistern says in an amused tone. Now, there's a sound from his end of the call and he leans to the side to look beyond the screen. Ah, hello Nikta. I was just... He doesn't get much further before the small, green-skinned woman climbs up into his lap to give him a kiss. A green metak. Where are her wings? Zavia asks, and that draws Nikta's attention. Oh, is that the primal Earthani in your army? Who's the little Erumenta girl? I'm Emmanuel Skitterway, and this is my adoptive daughter Zavia. You would be Ambassador Nikta Tal of Brule, would you not? That I am. What are you? You look like a metak, but I'm a Gobi sweetie. We're not quite the warriors metak are, but we're very curious and always have an answer to things. We're also really good with machines. Oh, okay, that's strange, Zavia says. Why is it strange? Emmanuel asks. Well, why do they look so much like metak? It doesn't make much sense. Well, why am I an insect in the same general shape as you, a mammal? And why are Nagasha and Jorgwa of a similar shape? Emmanuel asks, and Zavia just stares at him. He then smiles. There are a certain number of successful shapes in evolution. The torso with 2 manipulator arms, eyes above mouth and nose, and other such details are a very successful and common evolution. So much so that it became an imprint in the galaxy's axiom. Any race that begins thoughtfully using axiom ends up at the very least somewhat shaped like us. But wait, aren't humans? Aren't they from a place without axiom, where things wouldn't work like that? Oh, so you're not really that deep into null and axiom studies. All right, well, to explain that one, it's yes and no, Emmanuel states. Null is ultimately just axiom so thick and heavy it can't be used. So thick and heavy it makes the axiom around it unusable until it's worn away by all the moving axiom. Admiral Cistern states, I and my original contingent of soldiers come from deep inside the largest null repository in the galaxy. It's known as Cruel Space. Cruel Space itself is not stable in its location. It does move somewhat despite staying in the same general area. As such, there have been some important points where my species has been outside the null in the ancient past, we think. The records going back far enough for this to be confirmed are spotty at best. Why? Keeping track of a swirling vortex of death sounds pretty important. So why would the records be spotty? Zavia challenges him and he smirks. Simply put, they live too long. They become living historical records and many people think that's enough. Admiral Cistern remarks and Nikta gives off a small sound of discontentment. Is there another reason? No, but it sounds bad when you put it like that. Oh, you can describe anything in unflattering terms, Admiral Cistern asks. Excuse me, Admiral? Zavia asks. Yes, young lady? You're in charge of the undaunted, right? For now, in a few years it comes to vote. Right, but you made it right? I did. Why? Because I had to, young lady. I don't understand. May I explain, sir? Emmanuel asks. By all means, soldier, Admiral Cistern states. The undaunted exist because of politics and necessity, Emmanuel begins. To summarize humanity, a race like the Erumenta but without elements and a very robust physiology were trying to make proper first contact with the rest of the galaxy. Then all their information and orders were spied on all at once. This led to a problem. What kind? Humanity is not united. Because of this, many different nations and peoples were demanding special treatment, and a few even had orders to sabotage others. This meant that it was functionally impossible to follow the orders from Earth. And since they couldn't follow the orders of their homeworld, the first contact legally was not. So they were on a time limit until they were thrown out for lying, and that was when Admiral Cistern had a bright idea: to declare independence. That's treachery. Yes, Admiral Cistern notes. However, with the thousands of different orders I was given, there was no way I could do anything without committing treachery. So I did the only thing that made sense. Which was? Zavaya asks. He declared himself and all his soldiers and assets part of something new, the Undaunted, an army whose main goal is protection and rescue with a personal doctrine of being the best we can. How everything that goes up against us is either something that makes us stronger or a new test to overcome and find a greater strength. To be undaunted is to refuse the idea that you have limits and constantly push at what you cannot do until it's something you can do. Is that why a moth has been fluttering around and knocking down everyone's torches instead of being burnt? Zavaya asks, and Emmanuel theatrically puts a claw to his chest as if wounded. Yes, an amused admiral states, and there's some giggles from Nikta. Sir, you wound me. It'd be an impressive weapon to do that, Admiral Cistern notes. Actually, I've been meaning to ask, Nikta says excitedly. I read some reports over his shoulder, and you apparently forged some kind of metal with a new kind of energy with a black hole to compress things together, right? Yes. Then you applied it to your fur, keratin, and bones, right? Effectively turning this stuff into your armor and weapons, right? Yes. How? A lot of axiom nonsense, but using phasing techniques and the strange properties of the other direction, Emmanuel states. Right. That doesn't answer anything. Nikta complains, and he shrugs. Sorry, ma'am. This is a very new field of understanding, and we don't even have solid terms for things so far. Even calling it the other direction is mostly a placeholder. Well, nuts. When you figure it out, I hope you put it out there, because can I think of a few components that would be well served by being indestructible? Like all of them, Zavaya asks. What? No. If your vehicle has no crumple zones, then the transfer of kinetic energy is enormous and will downright shatter whoever's driving it. It's like the difference of hitting water and hitting rock when you're moving too fast. Yes, both can hurt or maybe even kill you if you hit it fast enough. But one's going to do so a lot easier than the other, Nikta says. Oh, I never thought of it like that. Well, think of it like being tossed in a lake against being tossed onto rocks. One of them collapses to take the blow, the other doesn't, Emmanuel explains. I've never been tossed in a lake before. That sounds like something that needs correcting, Emmanuel notes. No, it doesn't. And doesn't getting wet make Earthany go weird? You're right. I'll have to get your uncle to do it. Horace is just fine in the water. That's not what I meant. Don't worry, Daddy can read between the lines, Emmanuel assures her. No, nope, Zavaya says, squirming away from him and rushing to the exit of the room and leaving. Quite the way to get someone out of the room, Admiral Cistern compliments him. Out nothing. She's under an illusion and just to the side of the doorway. Emmanuel states, Is this invisible light again? I thought I had that covered, Zavaya complains. You have taken care of yourself on the infrared and ultraviolet spectrum, and good job for that. But you've gotten so caught up making yourself invisible to the eye that you stand out like a flare in the axiom. Zavaya swings her head around the corner with a frustrated look on her face. Really? Really? I'm willing to work with you on this, he says, and she sighs. And you'll find another way to find me just as fast, she says, looking upwards and walking across the open doorway as if dazed. Then you'll be one of the hardest to find light aeromenta there are if only one person can find you. Emmanuel offers, and she pauses and considers. Maybe, she says with a finger tapping her chin in thought. But we were talking about something else. That ceremony idea of yours is a very good one. So do you want to offer anything more about it? Emmanuel asks, and her eyebrows shoot up, shortly followed by her rushing into the room. Why didn't you say so earlier? I have ideas on how to make it look really good. I think you should just brainstorm for now. There's another couple of experts we should get in on this to make sure things go perfectly. But a ceremony that's at once a declaration of independence, throwing the gauntlet and declaring an ally needs to be a good one. Admiral Cistern states, Sir Philip, and Lady Ticanped at the least. Sir Philip has a refinement to him, and Lady Ticanped knows the galaxy's ceremonies like no other. Who's Lady Ticanped? I've heard of Sir Philip, but she's the Speaker of the Council. She has almost no official power, but she's made empresses, queens, and entire nations bend to her whims. She knows exactly how to make things look exactly the way she wants them to. If anyone can make a ceremony look regal, it's her. She sounds amazing, Zavia says, and Admiral Cistern smiles. I'll pass your compliments on to her, little lady.